Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of One Vision, the FinTech Fuse. This is Theo, your host for the episode. Joining us today is Brendan Kennealey, founder and CEO at Nesta. Welcome to the show, Brendan.
Hey, Theo. Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you, Kristen, for connecting us. For those who are not familiar with Nesta, can you tell us a little bit more about the company and what inspired you to start Nesta?
Sure. Well, thanks. Yeah, so my background actually is mostly in schools. I did a bunch of school startups. I ran a big high school for a while, and I got a lot of experience with budgeting and maintenance and repairs, and we did a lot of construction projects. We had to budget for that stuff. And so I had that just as a little bit of background. And a few years back, I was having dinner with one of my best friends, and he had just bought a house, and all this stuff was going wrong with the house. And since I had had a little bit of experience with these types of projects, I just started asking a bunch of questions. And what I learned was that the things that were going wrong in his house were really just things that were wearing out. You know, he needed a new hot water heater. He needed the roof started to leak and needed to be replaced. And what I learned was that really those things were just wearing out, but he had no visibility into that when he bought the house, despite the fact that he had a great realtor, he had a home inspection. He's a smart guy. He did all the things he was supposed to do as a home buyer, and he was still caught off guard. And I said, God, why is that the case? Like, this stuff is relatively predictable. We do this at the school level. We were by no means sophisticated. And I said, why don't people just do that for their houses? And so from that conversation and sort of that background, Nestor was born. And what we like to say is that nerds and contractors got together and created Nestor. And so what we do is we originally conceived of this as for a home buyer, in that before they put in an offer on a house, they would get a Nestor report, similar to how you get a Carfax report before you buy a used car. But our Nestor report, what it would do, unlike what Carfax focuses on, is that we would project forward and we would say, over the next 15 years, this is when all the major systems in that house will need to get repaired or upgraded. And so things like roof, windows, HVAC, major plumbing and electric, we put all of that on a very easy to read timeline over the next 15 years. And then importantly, we boil all that down to what we call the Nestor Fund, which is how much a buyer would need to save per month in addition to their mortgage in order to cover all of those costs going forward. And so it's almost like a capital reserve account, if for those who are familiar with that, but it's just for a home. And it's done on a monthly basis rather than on an annual basis. We don't take any of that money. It's just a suggested amount that they should be putting away in order to cover those costs. We do a bunch of other things as well. We now give every house a Nestor score, which is literally just a 0 to 100 score based on where is it in its maintenance life cycle. Give buyers some information about follow-up questions that they might want to ask. We give them an inventory of all the major systems in the house. The whole report is 2 pages. It's meant to be incredibly accessible to a novice buyer, because most buyers and even homeowners are really just overwhelmed by a lot of this stuff. They don't know what they don't know, and they get kind of paralyzed. And so we wanted to make it incredibly approachable and educational. And then pretty quickly we branched and now do the same thing for homeowners, because owners were coming to us and saying, hey, I don't need this to buy a house. I already own my house, but I'd still love to know what's coming and how to plan for it. And so we do the same thing now for homeowners.
I remember when we first talked a while back, I was like, this just absolutely resonates for myself, because I'm let's just say very particular about certain things, and I love Excel spreadsheets. And it's hard, right? When you go day by day, there are so many things that, can go wrong. It could go wrong and cost a fortune in the house that you need to somehow find a way to keep track of. What are the different major parts? Who do I contact if I need help? When is the next maintenance cycle? When do I need to get them replaced? How much, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, it's a never ending endeavor. And I can totally see this being helpful, not just for home buyer, homeowners, but, if I were to save up the money, who should I save it with? And what should I do with the money? Like, there are so many little tangents and extensions to it. I can't believe that no one has done this before. A silly
Yeah,
question to
no,
ask.
it is. It's one of those things. We get this all the time. So I should have, said in the beginning, my friend's experience that kind of launched all of this, and you, the fact that this resonates with you, that is the norm. It's actually the number one regret of homeowners is the unexpected cost of repairs and maintenance. But the reality is that most of those unexpected costs are actually relatively predictable. They're unexpected to the homeowner or the home buyer, but they're actually relatively predictable, because, a hot water heater has a useful life. An asphalt shingle roof has a useful life. And so sometimes just by putting it down on paper, seeing it visually is really helps. It says, okay, I can see what's coming. I can plan for it. I may not know the day something is going to need to be replaced, but I can be sort of mentally and emotionally sort of ready for what's coming. And now I take a little bit more, I have a bit more agency in the process if I know what's coming. And so, I think that has made a huge difference to people. It's not just the financial part of this. It's like the emotional side is a big part. Anyone who's bought a home, owns a home, knows that it's an emotional purchase, and for many. But we can help kind of reduce the anxiety and stress level by just making things a little bit more clear, and they don't need to be in a black box. And so we can help with that.
I can't agree more. I do not like things that just happen unexpectedly. And when we moved into this house, the one thing I appreciated the most with the previous owner, they left us with a box. Literally a box full of manuals for every single big part, a sticky note on top of each one that said, this is when they replaced it. This is the person you can reach out to for repair. I was like, wow, that was right. That was amazing. And so at least mentally, as you say, I would be prepared for it. Like, oh, this is still new. This has a few more years. Because, I mean, with so many things that happen, we talk a lot about financial security, about, emergency expenses, things that you didn't think about. In the midst of summer, what if your AC breaks, right? That's kind of bad. And then you couple everything together, it's enough to send you into a spiral. So I love what you guys do. That's a long way of saying it.
No, well, thank you. No, it's been great. It's been really, the best part is when we are able to give a nested report to someone, and you can, just see their response, and they say, okay, I get it now. Even if they don't love, oh, I didn't realize that there were these things coming that I should be aware of, but the light bulb went off, like, okay, now I understand what I'm up against, and what are the things I'm going to do to kind of resolve it, or maybe their nested report is really great in the sense that they don't have a lot of projected expenses coming soon, and they say, okay, good, I can handle this. I'm ready for this, this financial challenge, and that's really powerful.
It's a commitment. So let's switch gear a little bit, continue on the theme of home ownership.
Sure.
It is a main way that people build wealth in the United States. I remember that was like one of the first things that my parents told me when I graduated from college. Like, okay, now you need to start saving to get a roof over your head. You can't keep renting. So they've been hammering this idea into my head for years. But, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to own a home. And it's a privilege that not everyone have access to. So if we take a step back and look at the state of affairs in the country, unfortunately, a lot of these disparities persist. So I do want to pick your brain and ask you, what are some of the things that you think we should do as a society or as an industry, or something that can be done to help reverse the trend? Because it is one big way, if we look at, a lot of the differences between the different demographics group within the country, that's one big thing that stands out, is not being able to accumulate wealth via home ownership. So what can we do?
Okay, so big question.
It is a big question.
Big question, no, but it's a great question. It's a obviously, I think, a super important question. I think for many, home ownership has been sort of the definition, at least in this country, of the American dream. It's sort of part of that process of the American dream. And, homeownership is good for individuals and their families. It's good for neighborhoods. It's a stabilizing force generally for good. And so all of that is sort of in the plus column and really important. The challenge is that over the last 40 years, the cost of owning a home has gone. So in 1984, the average home cost about 3.5 times someone's income. And today, it's right about 6 times their income. And so on the one hand, so that obviously is squeezing out a lot of people. It's taking a lot of sort of wallet share, if you will, from folks. And, I guess on the plus side of that column would be, well, if you own a home and you bought it in 1984, it has appreciated and you have acquired wealth as a result of that. But for those who have owned homes, there's an incentive for that trend to continue because it benefits them. But what it does is it squeezes out those who haven't gotten access. And so I would actually push back against this notion that home ownership should be a primary way of acquiring wealth. I think home ownership is better suited as still being a fundamental part of the American dream and still being a fundamental stabilizer for families and communities. But if it is seen to acquire wealth, then the only way that happens is if it appreciates rapidly. And the downside of that is that it squeezes people out, because I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can have, if it's your primary way of acquiring wealth, that means it has to go up rapidly. But if it goes up rapidly, people can't have access. And so I think sort of society is better off with a more normalized, appreciation of that as an asset, putting more dollars back in people's wallets, which then they can use for things like my retirement account. Because right now people are being essentially forced to choose to pay their mortgage, but not funding things like their employer-sponsored retirement plan, which is getting matched, which is, so they're underfunding that in the hopes that their home appreciates and can sort of be their retirement plan, which I don't think is good. And in the meantime, they are, many people are choosing, are not able to help fund their kids or only have, $400 of savings, for an emergency, which, the average American, I think it's right around, only has around $400 in sort of emergency savings. And so they're making this choice, those that can, and are really squeezing a lot of things out of their wallet that probably should be in their wallet, if you will. And at the same time, there's just lots of people who just simply don't have access. And I don't, and that's not good. That's certainly not good for communities. And yeah, I would just say it's not simply a supply and demand issue either. I think sometimes it gets oversimplified as, oh, well, we just need more housing. Well, I don't think that's not the whole story. I think certainly it's probably a piece of the story. But housing, if you look at sort of population relative to housing units, that's remained relatively constant over the same period of time. Now, in certain areas, certainly certain cities have had booms and busts and things like that. So it can vary. But on a macro level in the U.S., population or housing units has kept pace generally with population. And despite that, there's been this huge spike in both rent and house and home prices, which is, made it difficult.
It is certainly a multifaceted problem. I remember reading an article in Wall Street Journal recently that basically alluded to, if the boomers would stop holding onto the houses, then we'll have more supply. And I found that an interesting thought-provoking heading. But at the same time, I found it hard to believe that just asking older people to sell the home would help, because think of what you were just saying about the appreciation of property prices. If you were to sell it and you use that chunk of money, you downsize, it's not like you're going to be able to have extra cash. Chances are you won't. And oftentimes, bigger houses, they serve a different purpose too. We have more and more younger people staying with their parents
Sure.
for longer. I think the Pew report was saying that this generation of younger people are the ones who actually stay back at home until the 30s or even later, because a couple of things. You have parents to help you out with your children, because that solves the whole caregiving question. It's very hard to find care. And it provides a little bit more cohesion between generations, which is another, challenge that we have. And younger people can't afford to buy a house, to your point, because they have to think about education, student loans, they have to think about saving for retirement, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So to your point, I don't know if there's actually a simple way of solving it. And it's a challenge that's just not here. It's everywhere too.
I don't think there's a simple way, because I think the only way would cause significant disruption, right? If home prices became more affordable, that means for some people who had houses that were valued at one level, they're now going to be valued at a lower level, right? That's the only way houses become more affordable. For that to happen, in some way, the crash, the sort of '09, '08, '09 crash would have been an opportunity when things did get kind of reset. That would have been an opportunity for, if something was going to happen, you'd already had the disruption. So is there something good that could come out of it? But unfortunately, those home prices snapped back pretty quickly. And so I think, I just think that's in the past, obviously, but going forward, I don't, at some point it's got to stop. I think at some point there will be another crash, if you will, because we're just not on a sustainable path.
We're not on a sustainable path. I can agree with that, definitely. I see the properties around here. We're right outside DC, and
right,
in some ways, for those, like you say, who already have it, is a good thing because it just kept going up. But in a bad way, I keep looking at it like, who can afford anything at this moment? And, then it creates a whole slew of problems. Anyway, but
it does.
Right, moving on, I do want to ask you, because the reason why we were both connected was from Kristen, which is from the inaugural cohort in CAFE. It's a Center for Accelerating Financial Equity. So talk about equity in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
I'm curious to hear, how did you decide that CAFE was the right one for your startup? Because that's one of the questions I get asked a lot as I talk to different founders. First question always is, should I join an accelerator? If so, who and why? So walk us through some of the thought process that you had when it comes to joining an accelerator, and in particular, CAFE, which is in Delaware.
Yeah. So we are actually a Delaware company. We're not just registered here. We are actually in Wilmington, Delaware. And so we were pretty connected geographically with CAFE. I know a lot of the folks that were involved in sort of the getting that started. And so that was a nice way of being introduced. But, more important for us was, they're working on, hey, what are ways that we can improve financial equity, and finding companies that are trying to solve some of these problems. And one of the things that we started to see more and more as we, launched Nestor, was that while a Nestor report is helpful and valuable for anyone along the financial spectrum, or any size house. We literally have houses on our platform that are under 100,000 all the way up to $4 million on our platform of homes, and we provide Nestor reports. But you can see that those have the most impact for people who are the sort of LMI home buyers, those folks that for whom home ownership is a stretch, and they aspire to home ownership, and they want to make sure that they are making good decisions and are ready for all the financial implications. And so our product really is a huge benefit to them. And so we saw that with what Cafe is doing as being a really great match, because we had a product that was helping the LMI homeowners, and Cafe is trying to work on getting any product that's helping improve financial equity to a mass market. And so we saw that as a really great match. Obviously, Kristen being the sort of the leader of that, she's a great leader, putting together a great program, and the other founders within the cohort have been fantastic, and they're working on really cool projects that are helping a lot of people.
And I love that. Anything for social impact that we can help, I think it's a great cause. We need more of those. Has anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say just one quick story as part of this that I think really just was powerful for us. One of our partners is Habitat for Humanity locally, and so those are, as most people know, Habitat for Humanity is helping people get into homes who may not be able to afford them, and there's a rigorous training process, educational process that goes on before they actually get into their home, and we are now partnering to provide them Nestor reports before they actually get into their home. And we presented this to a group of about to be brand new homeowners, and they were all single moms, and they were about to become homeowners. They were quite nervous about becoming homeowners. They had worked for over a year for this moment. And we shared with them what we were going to be providing and shared them their Nestor reports, and the visible relief there was this sort of exhale almost of thank you. Like I didn't know about all this stuff. I was anxious about it, and now I understand what's coming and I can plan for it. And honestly, just to see the look on their face and just their relief was really moving and powerful. And so to me, what Nestor can do for that, for those women and for obviously for others, that was really powerful. But I think it speaks to some of the work that Cafe is doing as part of their accelerator.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, sure.
So curious to know, has anything changed between when you thought of this concept for Nestor to where it is right now, and where is it going? Because oftentimes we do, there's no straight path when it comes to starting a business. Definitely things change. What would you say to any aspiring entrepreneurs looking back? What have you learned?
There's a lot. Yeah, I would say no. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot. I think the core product is essentially what it was conceived to be. We've added bells and whistles and made things better and all this stuff. Early on, we actually thought that we would, I said we come up with this timeline, and then we have this Nestor fund, and we tell people what we think they need to save. Originally, the idea was that we would they would give us that money and we would help them save it. We very quickly abandoned that idea because we didn't want to be a bank, and that it was just more complicated. So we did pivot away from that, but that was really early. I would say the thing that has shifted the most for us has been essentially our distribution channel. We knew that we didn't want to be a B2C company. It's too difficult. It's too hard and expensive. And we originally, our focus was on realtors and going through realtors. That sort of made sense. That's where home buyers are. They're in touch with homeowners. The reality, and we spent a good bit of time working on that. The reality is just their incentives and ours are not really that aligned. There's a high incentive on the part of realtors to close deals, and we're providing a lot of transparency and information into the process. We'll see how the NAR, there's been a big lawsuit, class action lawsuit, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and some of that may actually change because we just, at the end of the day, our incentives were not aligned, and we pivoted actually quite a bit, and now working on selling through both government entities. So states have home buyer programs, they're really big. So we're doing a lot of that. And they have this dual incentive of home ownership is a good thing and want to see people helping them have transparency and not get in over their head. And so that was big. And then the other is banks and financial institutions. who are using Nestor as a tool a highly interactive tool for their clients, for their customers, using it as part of the mortgage process, and just being a value add in their process as they look for ways to better serve their customer base and give them tools. For most people, their home is their largest asset. And so we're able to provide a financial tool that helps them understand the costs associated with their largest financial asset. And so banks using that as a tool is sort of our other path. And where are we going? Sorry, I think that was the last part of your question. So yeah, this is kind of where we are. The next thing coming, it's pretty cool. We're calling it our enterprise platform. So we are built from the ground up. If you have basically a single family house, we can give you a report. There are lots of folks out there, small investors, public housing operators, single family rental operators that have multiple houses. And so what we will be launching very soon is an enterprise platform, which basically aggregates up. So if you have 10 homes that you're kind of a small, investor and have rentals, 10, or if you have 10,000 homes, we can aggregate all that information up to you. So now we can say, okay, so let's say you have 10,000 rentals. Well, over the next year, these, or 2 years, these 100 houses are going to cost you the most, or this is how many hot water heat. We have to talk to, there's a public housing authority that we're working with on this, and we can help. They have 350 units, and they just replace hot water heaters when they break. Well, we'll be able to tell them, hey, next year you're probably going to need to replace 25 hot water heaters, and now they have some leverage as they do procurement, and they can plan for these things, and they can actually do them proactively rather than in response to when they break, which is a much better and cheaper way to do things, especially if you have 350 units, or if you have 10,000 units. It's a lot of visibility into the maintenance side of those things. So that's kind of next up for Nestor.
That almost makes sense. Like, you want to be proactive instead of reactive, and you have that much skill when you have many of those. So that's brilliant. I didn't know about the realtor. That's unfortunate, but like you say, things do change, because I'm thinking back on my journey. I loved my realtor, and
I loved my realtor as well. And I have, obviously I have tons of friends who are realtors, and they are great realtors. And that industry is changing rapidly, and
never know.
And so but I think things are going to need to change as the industry has changed, and it's changed in every other developed country. We've seen massive shift in both the number of realtors and the commissions charged by realtors, except in the United States with the
like
advent
to be
of
different.
And so yeah, it's just it has to evolve. I absolutely think there is still a very valuable place for good realtors in the market, but I think part of that is providing transparency into the deal and what's coming, and that's just a part of it. And right now this market is just so hot. It's such a buyer's market. I mean, excuse me, it's such a seller's market that there's no incentive right now for anybody to do anything. You put your house on the market, it's sold the next day. There's no due diligence of any kind, and that's going to come back. I mean, that is going to come back to haunt a lot of home buyers, unfortunately. But that's just the cycle of things, and the real estate market, like everything, kind of goes in cycles, and so yeah.
All right, so before we wrap, here's the fun question to close the conversation. I love this one. We do a variation of those, but here we go. So if you were to leave 3 things in a time capsule that will be opened in 50 years' time, what would that be, and why?
This is I think the hardest question.
And that's the report.
Yeah, well, okay, that's one. But all right, so Peter, I love books. I love to read, and so I think best book that I read recently. It's not my favorite book of all time, but it's the best book I read recently. So I think sort of leaving it as the time capsule from today, if you will, was Gentleman in Moscow, Immortals. It's great, Gentleman in Moscow. So that it's a few years old. I forget how many. It's 5 or 6 years old or something. But great book. He's a great author. So I'm a reader, so I would leave that. I would leave my phone in the hopes that 50 years from now, things look really different. Not just the physical phone looks different, but how we interact looks different, particularly around social media, which I am a part of, and I have to be. But particularly how I think it affects kids, less so on the adult side. So I leave my phone. It is the thing that is with me the most in any day, basically. So that's two. And then I would leave a Nestor report as a relic of what we were when we started, and hope that 50 years from now it looks a whole lot different and is a whole lot better. And I would just leave with, I'd put it all in an Amazon box, because I think nothing is probably, it's so symbolic of this day, is the Amazon box at your door, for good and bad.
For good and bad.
Kids and stuff, they're here every other day. But
that's funny. You are the first one that mentioned the Amazon box. No one else did that. We've had plenty of books. We have had phones. We have had artifacts on things they do, but you're the first one with the box. So see, that's why I love asking this question, because it's really interesting to see how we all think. We have had one guest who said she wants to leave a sample of clean air to remind us in the future, this was what we had access to. Hopefully we'll still have it, but we don't know. The world's changing. So, but this is fun. I will ask you again next year to see if anything changed. But
I'm sure it will. It will change. I'm sure it will change.
Maybe it won't be a phone anymore, it'll be an implant. So before I let you go, where can we find out more about Nestor and what you do?
Thank you. So we are at Nestor, Nester .app, A-P-P. So you can go there, and if you're a home buyer or a homeowner, you can get a Nestor report right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brendan, for joining us today. It's been fun. And for the rest of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of One Vision, the FinTech Fuse. We will talk to you all next week.